Hey everyone, in our latest podcast, we sit down with the founder and executive chairman of the largest cannabis company in the world, Boris Jordan from Curaleaf, where they unveiled their latest financial reports and some interesting information on safe banking. If there's any company that's more connected to Washington, it's Curaleaf, and the chances of safe banking have increased drastically. Why? He breaks it all down right now in our latest Trade to Black podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Trade to Black podcast. I am your host, Shadd Dales. We've got a big time guest here on the podcast today, but before we get in, we want to know your comments, your feedback. What did you think about Curaleaf's latest earnings reports? Leave a comment below. And where do you think this industry is going as far as legislation? Will we see safe banking? Yes, we ask this question a lot, but we want to hear your feedback. If you like what we're producing, then subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to click on that bell for notifications. As usual, before we get into details of this week's podcast, all views on the Trade to Black podcast and the guests on this podcast are pure the opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or our guests as investment advice. The views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. Okay. Let's welcome in our guest of the week. He is the founder and executive chairman of Curaleaf. Mr. Boris Jordan joins us. Good day, sir, and it's great to finally have you on our podcast.
Great to be here, Shadd and Ben. Looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, it's great. As well, our lead financial writer, Benjamin A. Smith, joins us. Ben, great to see you.
Great to be here. Cannabis earnings season is here, and I'm just taking it all in.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get right into earnings. Boris, you just announced Q2 2022 financial results, which largely met expectations and beat revenue forecasts by about $3 million. Some of the highlights: you grew EBITDA in tough market conditions and elevated gross margins by 260 basis points sequentially as well. So obviously impressive. Overall, how did you feel about the results given, let's face it, we're in uncertain times right now with the economy?
Listen, I think this is maybe one of the best quarters we've ever had. We had very strong top line growth of 8%. Sequentially, we were able to grow over 200 basis points. Gross margin over 200 basis points. EBITDA margin. We paid a huge amount of taxes in the second quarter. $110 million. We had $20 million of interest payments, $30 million of capex, and we still came up positive cash flow for the first half of the year. So, we're going into the second half of the year, which is going to, I think, be very, very strong from a cash flow generation and continued margin expansion. So listen, we're happy. Everything we've done to build Curaleaf over the years and invest, and we got criticized for in the early parts of overinvesting is now starting to come to fruition. Mm-hmm. We're at scale, and when everybody else is going to be having margin compression, we're going to be having margin expansion. And that speaks to investing early and wisely.
Yeah.
Now, Boris, the thing that kind of stood out to me was the margin expansion, up 260 basis points, I believe. How were you able to do that in this sort of market conditions? Because obviously, we have inflationary forces, the consumer is pulling back in some of retail segments, and we've seen that with earnings season for other earnings like retail stocks. So how were you able to accomplish that?
So, listen, obviously, I'm not going to lie. New Jersey helped a lot, right? You go to adult use in a market where Curaleaf has a 35% share. We're ready for that, more than probably anybody else, because we've been in that market for a long time. So, that obviously helped. And the other thing that helped is that we made a very important decision with Matt, our new CEO, to start scaling back during this very difficult time in California and Colorado, right? So, we were big into California, big into Colorado. We looked at what's going on there. There's the race to the bottom between all the local operators basically trying to survive for cash. Yeah. We decided we don't want to play in that game. So we adjusted our wholesale strategy to the 80-20 concept. And that is that 80% of our business comes from 20% of the stores. Yeah. So instead of covering 450 doors, we brought that down to covering 20% of that. But that's 80% of our business. So we were both able to reduce staffing and cut back in low margin business, and that increased obviously with the growth in New Jersey and Florida. That more than compensated for the fact that we reduced. So it helped margin it reduced sales a little bit, but it really helped the margin overall, both on the growth side and on the EBITDA side. So that was really the strategy. It's not overly complicated, but it's one that worked.
California is an interesting market. It's funny how I have these conversations, and it depends on who you ask. I had a guest on a couple weeks ago that said California is going to go through radical changes over the next 12 months, and it will become eventually the largest cannabis market perhaps in the world. But like you said, you've made some cutbacks and kind of re-strategized and focus on 20% of the states that do 80% of the business. Outside of like this discussion of earnings, what's your take on the whole California market right now?
So listen, I was actually a proponent in Curaleaf, and it's no secret, to actually double down. We were about to buy a very low cost, very efficient producer in California, and I thought that was going to help us with our margins. But as we did due diligence, we saw that even the lowest cost producers in the state were losing their shirt because of the problem of a race to the bottom. Now, there's one company that's really the culprit in this, and although I have respect for everybody, but let's be honest, Stizzy is causing havoc in California. And, I don't know how they're able to finance what they're doing. They're definitely not making money, because I know that market as good as anybody that's in that market. And I can tell you that the prices at which they're selling, they're losing just a ton of money. And I don't want to play that game. We have a very well-recognized national brand in Select. Everybody knows it. California, everybody knows we can bring those sales down a little bit for a year or so until that market comes down, and then we'll ramp back up as margins recover. But I'm not going to play this game where I'm going to try to go for market share in a market where I'm losing. Listen, in Florida, I went for market share, right? And I got 100% market share growth in a year against basically Trulieve at their expense. And I expanded margins. I went from a 38% EBITDA margin to a 45% this quarter in 3 quarters, and I grew 100% of my business. That's a business where I will go for market share. But to go for market share in a race to the bottom doesn't make any sense to me, because you're just losing a lot of money, shareholders' capital. So we decided to scale that back for now. But we're not leaving those states by any means. As a matter of fact, we're continuing to invest. We're bringing our ACE extraction technology to California. It's almost installed fully now in Colorado. That gives us a huge competitive edge, not only high quality products, but more importantly in costs. And so, we're not getting out. We're just taking a temporary breather on growth in those states while those states are racing to the bottom.
Okay, good to point. Did you want to go ahead, Ben? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a good point on California. Even after the taxes, I guess we're going to decrease. That's not enough to keep you in the state, but you're going to invest, but you're just going to stay out from being all in right now, right?
Yeah,
you're
listen, I think California. To get to the question, actually, Chad, yes, I think California is going to come back. I think it's a strong market. It's a market where all the innovation happens. I'm massively bullish long term. I just think that in the short term, they got 2 things that they need to deal with in California. The biggest problem they have is the illicit market.
Right.
Okay, and the illicit market, there's virtually no enforcement on the illicit market, right? There's some enforcement in LA County, but that's not where the real problem is. The real problem's up north, in Humboldt and other places where they're growing all this cannabis illegally, and they don't have to pay taxes on it, and they're distributing it not only in California but all over the whole country. And that's the real problem that we're having right now is the illicit market. The taxes are secondary. Yes, the taxes were too high in California. Everybody understands that. The cultivation tax was a stupid concept. It almost killed most of the legal cultivators, if not, look, King's Garden has basically gone into insolvency. On the back of it is one of the biggest operators in California. I know those guys well, good operators, but they can't survive in a market where they had to pay those kind of taxes.
Yeah.
But I do think, listen, from everything I'm seeing, permits are down 50% on grows from last year. A lot of the licenses come due and have to be renewed in October. I think most of them are not going to be renewed. So I actually think that a lot of the excess capacity in California over the next 12 to 18 months is going to come down, and I think California will start to recover. And that's why we're not leaving California. We're just not going to play the next 6 to 12 months of race to the bottom.
Well, I'm curious to see how much this becomes even an environmental issue with the black market. I asked this question recently. Like every single time you turn on the news, you hear about a natural disaster, and water's becoming a huge concern within that state. And if that becomes, especially in a state that produces 25% of produce across the country, these are some of the things where the government, in addition to obviously creating illegal marijuana, it becomes an environmental issue too. And that is a real concern with people obviously on the West Coast right now. And like I said, every single time you turn on the news, you hear about some sort of natural disaster that's taking place in California. So have you heard anything like that? Is that a concern within the state at all?
Listen, if you ask me how they run California, I can't tell you because,
Yeah, I hear you.
I got to tell you, as a little kid, I used to go to San Francisco with my father almost once a month because he worked out there. And I got to tell you, that was my favorite city in the country. I loved San Francisco. It's a beautiful town, rich with history, everything. I mean, that place is unlivable today. I mean, literally, you can't live there anymore. I mean, it's just, what I've seen in that town, and obviously there's a lot of people that live there and they're having to deal with this, but it's just horrible what's going on. And LA, I have a son who's lived in LA for a long time. I go visit him. What's happened to LA as well. So I don't understand what they're doing in California. I have no answer to your question on that because everything they do seems to be counterintuitive to development of the state. Yeah. And everybody's going to Austin. Like everybody's going to Austin.
Everybody. Hot market to say the least. Let's talk about some of your product and brands. When looking at transaction volume in dispensaries, it continues to trend up, which is great. However, the average order volume basket sizes has not kept pace. Consequently, you guided full year revenues to the low end of previously issued guidance. So based off of this, let's face it, these are challenging times. So what types of strategies, I guess, that you can share that maybe investors can anticipate that keeps consumer spending in dispensaries moving forward, as you said, towards the back half of 2022, knowing that you think this will be a very lucrative one for you?
Yeah, listen, we obviously on a organic basis, we're concerned with what we're seeing. And what we're seeing is people are coming in more often but spending less. Okay. At the moment that those two things are basically netting each other out. So we've seen the basket size come down a little bit, but it's negligible at the moment. Okay. But it's a trend, right? It's a trend. It's a paycheck to paycheck trend. It's a trend. Oh, I have money, I'll go in. So the good news in that is it's a staple. People are still coming in once they get some cash to buy cannabis. That's the really, really good news behind the story. So it's not something that they're foregoing. It's something that they want. The bad news is it's showing pressure on the consumer because they're only coming in when they have some cash in their pocket, right? So they're not pre-planning like they used to come in, hey, I'll come in, or I'll come in, I'll just buy a bunch of cannabis. They're saying, okay, I've got some cash, I'll go in. What we haven't seen, which is what the previous MSO that reported before us, GTI said, was they're seeing them going down to cheaper products. We haven't seen that at Curaleaf stores yet, right? We are seeing our customers still sticking to the products they were buying before. So those that were attracted to premium products are continuing to buy premium products, just coming in more often and spending a little less. Right. For those that were buying lower products are still buying those. So, but we listen to what's going on. We look at historic trends, and if they don't get control of this inflationary pressure, that's why we guided to the lower end of the range. That could affect the second half of the year. So they could still be coming in more often, but the check could be coming down. If people start losing jobs, they can stop coming in. That's the issue. So you have to be prudent in this kind of environment. You can't be crazy and go out and say, oh, we're going to continue this kind of same growth rate. Now, obviously, our growth rate is still going to be pretty strong going to year end, but that's largely due to an acquisition that's closing at the end of September, which is the Trike acquisition. So we're going to get a big bounce in the fourth quarter from that, which is why we stayed within the guidance of 1.4 to 1.5, but albeit at 1.4. So we're pretty confident. We know how that business is doing, that we'll hit that number. But on an organic side, we definitely brought down our growth a little bit, given what we're seeing in the market, just to be cautious.
Gotcha. So Boris, it sounds like with that being said, that sales are pretty stable, again, in these very tough conditions, not only for the economy, especially on the inflationary side. So the consumers are obviously getting squeezed, and we're seeing this, all over with high gas prices, high energy prices, et cetera. So with sales being relatively stable, I have to ask, do you think cannabis is more of a consumer staple or a consumer discretionary product? Because there's a lot of debate whether cannabis is going to take sort of the form of alcohol, which tends to be very stable in sales during times of economic downturn. So what do you think it is? Is it
So
even a blend of two, or is it one or the other?
that was the assumption I was making that when I was talking to you is that earlier is that what we're seeing is that they're coming in when they have money, but they're still coming in. So they're not leaving. They want the product. So cannabis is a product that people need and want, and they are buying it. So listen, we are much earlier stage than alcohol in our development. But my gut feeling says to me, and we saw this during the pandemic as well, is that people, that are cannabis users are going to continue to be cannabis users no matter what.
Right.
Let's I want to focus on New Jersey. Total revenue is up 8% sequentially. It was apparent that obviously your New Jersey adult use sales, which began back on April 21st of this year, gave you a material boost top line wise. Overall, how have you liked the state, how it's performed? Overall, just I guess, has the market been everything you expected it's been so far?
Yeah, listen, New Jersey has, I wouldn't say it's exceeded expectations, but it's met expectations, and my expectations were pretty bullish. So I'm pretty happy with the way things are going in New Jersey. It's a perfect example of, when you execute well and you execute at a high level, what can happen. And we've had our ups and downs as a company. We're learning as we go along. It's a new industry, but this is one where we took all of the mistakes we've ever made and we made sure we were ready for this market to open up. And let me tell you something, it's been a home run. So even with regulatory holdups of some of our stores, given political stuff, we were still able to exceed our own internal ambitious budgets because of the wholesale market. So both wholesale and retail have delivered. We're opening up our biggest store here. We hope early mid-September. We're going to get the full fourth quarter on it. Obviously, that's a margin booster for us because when we sell through our own stores, we get that extra margin that we lose when we wholesale out. And as more and more companies are opening up stores, we're the provider of cannabis in that state today. So, and probably will be for some time to come because it takes a long time to build capacity. Curaleaf had the capacity there. We have 2 large grow facilities firing on all cylinders. And so there was actually an article yesterday, I think in Leafly on this. We producing 8,000 cartridges a day out of our manufacturing facilities there. So, we are absolutely ready in that state. And listen, we're early stage growth, right? That's a $2 billion plus market. And, we're running at probably at a $300-400 million run rate right now. So that thing's just getting going.
Yeah.
So how do you see, and that's great that what's happening in New Jersey. Now, of course, New York is going to come online either with adult use cannabis sales, either, fourth quarter of this year or perhaps, the first half of next year. How do you see that market shaping up?
So you're going to see some pressure from us. Up until now, we've tried to really play ball with them and be very, very cooperative and try to help out. But, they have no interest in working with the existing operators. They're trying to do it their own way.
Why is that? Why is that, you think?
Because they're hung up on the social justice issues, which, by the way, are relevant. I'm not saying they're not relevant. And we're big proponents. We're probably the most active MSO in the area of social justice. But they need to build the business foundation first and then bring in, these licenses and stuff like that. And the MSOs have been willing to help. We've been able to, we've said we're ready to finance by giving product to these operators on good terms. Lots of things that we're prepared to do, put up cash, but they're trying to do it their own way. It's not going to work. We've seen this we saw it in Illinois, we saw it in New Jersey. It never works. So we're hopeful they'll come back to us, sit down, start cooperating with the MSOs and get the program launched. But they can't launch a program without product. And the build, they thought the hemp farmers were going to be able to produce enough product to sell these things, but they can't. So it's impossible. So, they need to sit down with the MSOs, start having a conversation with us. We're more than willing to cooperate and compromise on the program, but at the moment it's largely a blackout. Like, I mean, last time we spoke to the regulators was a month and a half ago. They were like, let's go, we're going to work together. We haven't heard a word from them since.
So what's your response? What do you want to communicate to the public on how you can help not only a thriving business, but at the same time when it does come to social justice? Like, what is some of the
listen, we are absolutely focused on that issue. I think that what's happened in the United States with the war on drugs has been massively misguided. I think the facts are undeniable that it was discriminatory against minority communities, and it needs to be fixed.
Right.
But you don't do it by dividing people. You do it by uniting people, right? Cannabis, this industry is as liberal when it comes to issues like this as you can possibly come. Yeah. We are very open to it. We understand the hardships that were created by the war on drugs, and it needs to be fixed. But bring us in. We're part of the solution. Don't throw us out because you don't think that we fit your tribe or the bill. I mean, bring us in. We are absolutely open to working, and we have done it. I mean, in those states where they have brought us in, it's been a very good relationship. But
right.
New York and New Jersey and Illinois have been hostile on the issue. Maybe it's the people running the programs, I don't know, but they've been hostile. And I think that that's a massive mistake. And the programs in those states, for that reason, have been largely unsuccessful. Not only because of the states, but obviously we haven't talked about the federal stuff, but because of some of the federal stuff as well. And I think that the one thing I liked is Senator Cory Booker, who's a smart guy, who was misguided in the beginning in thinking that passing SAFE was basically a white guy law or I think that was even a quote. Has now understood that without safe banking, you can't have social justice in the cannabis community. Because
what do you think has made him change his sentiment?
You know what? I think it's our advocacy. Sitting down with staffers, his people, talking. And when some of the minority lobby groups started to come in and say, oh, Jesus, actually, this is right. We can't have a thriving minority ownership in this industry if we're borrowing at 40%.
Yeah.
Or if we're, so they understood themselves that they need this. And also for the safety of workers, there's a reason why it's called SAFE, right? We're starting to have people killed in these dispensaries because of a lack of attention from the federal government on this issue. I personally hold the federal government responsible for the crimes against the workers in this industry because of the lack of their action. And so
now,
go ahead, Ben.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, speaking of SAFE, since you brought that up, Boris, I want to get your take, and we have to ask. I know it's been sort of beaten to death. We've talked about it ad nauseum in the industry, social media, everywhere. But what is your take on the chances of safe banking passing as an amendment or standalone through the NDAA or whatnot? And where do you see the industry going if the House flips over, if the Senate flips over after the midterms, and now McConnell's back in? Mitch McConnell is the Senate Majority Leader, and he's historically not been pro-cannabis in a lot of ways. Are you concerned at all? Because the moats have already been built in your industry. The leaders have already been forged. So, federal reform is an important factor.
I will tell you, I'm going to address that issue first. In business, and I've been doing this for 30 years, leaders are never around forever. And there's always a guy coming out of a garage somewhere who's got a better idea. So you got to be on your toes all the time. So yes, there are some leaders today, but it doesn't mean they're the leaders in even 6 months. So I just want to correct that one thing from my perspective, at least. Listen, I think that we have the best chance we've ever had, right? And I don't say that lightly. I don't say this lightly because I've been a real skeptic recently on SAFE. Because of what I see, and we spend more time there than anybody else. Everybody recognizes that. We're very active in Washington, but right now we see the best chance, and there's two reasons. The first is that obviously the Democrats, Booker's come off as position that, it's either full legalization and everybody gets out of jail, to understanding that let's take baby steps to get to where we have to get to. Let's maybe get some money for expungements, which I agree completely on. Let's get, a little bit, and then let's move forward. The other thing is on the Republican side. So that was a real major issue, getting Booker on side. The other major issue is the Republicans, right? And what I'm hearing right now is that there's a huge amount of pressure from the credit unions and the banks and the banking association on the Republicans to pass this. And it's even coming from the Treasury and FinCEN. They're basically saying, guys, we need this, right? Republicans have historically been close to Wall Street, close to the financial services community. Yeah. The financial service community saying, guys, we need this. We're already handling billions of dollars of these people's money, and we're doing it illegally. We can't carry that risk. So we need to solve the problem. Unfortunately, they're not thinking about the employee, which is what I'm thinking about. The employee that had his bank account canceled, that can't borrow for his mortgage, that can't get a car loan because he's working for a federally legal business. They don't give a shit about them, unfortunately. That's what I care about. But what they're saying is that, we as businesses are in violation of laws, and we're holding all this money anyway. Can you please give us something to hang our hat on? And so I think that McConnell's position on this right now, from what I'm hearing, is one and done. I don't want to deal with cannabis when I'm majority leader, sorry. I don't want to deal with cannabis at that point in time. That was a Freudian slip, by the way. But I don't want to deal with cannabis. So let's get it out during the lame duck. I can hang it on the Democrats, and I can give my lobby, the banks, what they want. So I'll give the banks, I'll get the banks off my back.
That's interesting.
And I don't need to then deal with cannabis when I'm the majority leader. So I think that's where he is right now.
And that's a real possibility you're saying.
Oh, I'm telling you guys. So I'm never going to say, I'm not going to give you percentages on this, but I can tell you that the percentages from people I trust on safe has gone from 50 to like 80 in the last month and a half.
So we could see something like this between, say, the midterms and the end of the calendar year is what you're thinking.
I think it's going to happen during lame duck. I mean, guys, I worked in D.C. in 1986. That was a lame duck year. I can tell you, and if you look at the history, the more laws get passed in lame duck Congresses than they do during what you'll call, because what happens is the party that's going to lose control goes crazy to get anything they want. The party that's taking control basically says, okay, let's give these guys what they want, and then they'll hopefully cooperate with us on stuff we want as we're a majority party. So a lot of stuff gets done during lame duck, a lot more than it does in traditional congressional periods. Yeah, so I actually think that we might get this thing done. Let's see. We're working on that, and we're positive on it.
Last thing I wanted to bring up before we let you run is Europe. You touched on a little bit on the calls. You spoke highly about the European market, and the following day you announced that you took a majority stake with Germany's 420 Pharma, which is, for anyone that doesn't understand, is a fully EU GMP and GDP licensed producer and distributor of medical cannabis. So before we get into the details of that announcement, you're arguably the largest cannabis company in the world, have a true understanding of the European market. We've been talking about this industry or this market for quite some time, and it's moving kind of like at a snail's pace, but everybody that talks about it says it's a very lucrative one, especially Germany. So you being founder and executive chairman of perhaps the largest cannabis company in the world, what does the German market present to investors that are invested in companies that obviously have a strategy and a footprint within that country?
Okay, so I'm going to correct one little thing. We are the largest cannabis company.
Okay, all right.
On every metric, and we're very proud of that. So, okay. And I say that for my employees because they do a great job, and I believe they deserve the recognition. The second thing is that, listen, I've always had a very different vision to my competitors in the sector. And I'm not saying mine is right. As a matter of fact, I would argue mine is more criticized than anybody else's. And that is that I feel early on in industries, and I try to learn from people that have done it before me and are much smarter than me, people like Jeff Bezos at Amazon. I followed his career for 30 years now and what he built. And I don't listen. Everybody's criticizing me for having slightly worse margins, slightly worse cash flow. I am going for growth, and I'm going for footprint, and I'm going for distribution of my brands in every market I can possibly get into that makes sense from a ROI perspective, right? Germany is an 80 million person market. There's 29% cannabis use in Germany, according to their own government. Okay.
Is really that much? Wow.
29% of their country uses cannabis. I mean, you can't walk down the street in Berlin without smelling cannabis. It's kind of like New York, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's an 80% market. It's very fragmented right now as a medical market, and they're moving to adult use, right? Mm-hmm. So that market is going to be a $5 to $10 billion market 5 years out, right? That's what's going to happen. And I wanted to get to Europe early. So I bought EMAC a year and a half ago because I built the largest data center business in Europe. I know how long it takes to get shit done in Europe, right? It's not the United States. There's a lot more red tape in Europe. However, ironically, the cannabis legislation in Europe, much better than the US because we don't have 280E. So every dollar I earn, I'm not paying on gross profit taxes. So
good point.
Because it's not subject to 280E. So, every dollar I own there is like $3 in the United States. It's just crazy. Yeah. The next thing is that Europe allows you don't have to build in every country. So I can have all of my manufacturing and all of my cultivation in one location and distribute throughout the whole continent. Second thing is the TAM in that continent is 229 million people. The economy is bigger. Nobody realizes, but the European economy is bigger than the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
As a whole, we're going to make another announcement tomorrow in Europe. I mean, we have a lot of things are happening. A lot of countries are adopting medical and adult use cannabis, and they're doing it in a legal format. So we don't have any of the impediments we have in the U.S. with the federal illegality.
Go ahead, Ben.
So Boris, I have to follow up on that because there's no question about the market size, the market potential, and all that. My final question would be, we saw the same sort of excitement, enthusiasm when Canopy Growth, Aurora Cannabis, back in the Canadian legalization, the pre-legalization days, got into Europe, and it turned out to be a huge operational cash flow sink for them because the European countries weren't ready to legalize then. So my question is, why now? Why do you think now is the time and that cannabis legalization is going to unlock in Europe and that you're positioned at the right time, at the right place?
It's
mature. You know what they say, like they say in real estate, it's location, location, location. It's business. It's timing. So I mean, guys, when they were coming into these markets didn't even have medical programs. I mean,
yeah, you're right.
They were just discussing medical programs, right? I mean, the UK has one of the fastest growing medical programs in the world right now. It's awesome. We're the absolute leader in that market in the UK. Now, yes, it's growing from a low base, but we're growing 300% per year. This is the way we grew in the United States back in 4 years ago when we were going public. Germany is 80 million people are about to get access to adult use cannabis. How can you ignore that? That's like California, New York, and Canada put together. I mean, just think about the size of that market.
So are they going to get it done this year? Is Germany going to get it done?
It's 24. I mean, one thing about the Germans, when they say they're going to do something, they do it. It's not like the United States, right? The Germans are very focused. They're coming out with the law in October. It's going to be voted on in December. They're going to write the rules next year. They want to launch early 24. Let me tell you what happened. The Minister of Health that's been given responsibility to do this in Germany was told by the parliamentary committee that he was moving too slow, and if he didn't move faster, they were going to cut his budget. I mean, that's the kind of government I like.
So nice carrot.
Yeah, that's a great government. How much do you think the European market fast tracks once Germany goes live, based on the
I think it's a domino. They always say, like the United States, as I said earlier, the United States gets a cold, the world gets a heart attack. They say the way Germany goes, Europe goes. So I think it's a domino effect on the back of that, right? Because it's the largest, most wealthiest country in Europe, and everybody wants to look at what they're doing. But everybody there, look, France has a medical program brewing. Italy has a medical program. UK has a medical program. Spain and Portugal a little slower, but actually Portugal has one.
Yeah.
Spain is developing one now. Listen, there's other countries I'm talking to right now that you can't believe the programs that they're trying to institute. I just spent 3 months in Europe this year. I've been back and forth maybe twice, but I've been basically living there, going country to country, meeting with these guys, making sure that the investment I invested in Europe pays off. And I am more bullish today on what's going on out there than I've ever been. And for me, listen, I always plan out. I have U.S. growth, and then I was saying, okay, as the U.S. starts to get saturated, as more competition, as there's margin pressures, what am I doing? And then Europe is my next market. It's a perfectly natural. I have experience building businesses there. I know the landscape. So for us, it may not be for everybody, but for us, it made a lot of sense. And now we're building on that, and we've made this acquisition. This is the #1 distributor of cannabis in Germany. They got one of the top 2 brands in the marketplace. It wasn't, we didn't have to overpay because we started negotiation a while ago on this deal. It takes a lot to do deals in Europe. We're super excited about it. It gives us, now we have to build the supply chain out of Portugal, but now we have all the distribution we need in Germany. I mean, these guys are top of the class of distributors in Germany. We're super happy with the acquisition. It's a strong team. It's going to help us in Europe as a whole. So listen, I'm obviously bullish, but it's a 24, 25, 26 story, right? And I get criticized for making investments a little early, but I'm telling you, what people don't realize is it takes a long time to get in a market like Europe, right? EU GMP is like a curse word in the U.S. because no one in the U.S. qualifies under EU GMP. The Canadians do, the Europeans, but that's a lot more investment to get and time to get that certification. It takes a long time to get that certification on your product. You have to rebuild your grows. You have to approach, the way you manufacture completely differently than what we do in the U.S. So you have to do this in advance to be ready for a market launching. And first mover advantage is very important. I want to be the first guy to be able to supply the German market with high quality branded products when they press the button on adult use. Like, I want to be there because it's going to get saturated like all the other markets do, but the first movers get their brand cemented and they get the higher margin in the first couple of years of operation.
Yeah. It comes down, even like you and I were attending a couple of weeks ago, the one Twitter space group. Just the reality is that I think just a lot of investors, the expectations have been set wrong from the days of the Canadian time where it's just people made a lot of money overnight, and they still want those days to come. But again, like you said, this does take time. There's some valid questions I think investors do have for companies like yourselves. But at the end of the day, it's not an answer people want to hear, but these things do take time, right?
Listen, they take time, and also you understand one more thing. I'm the only person in the cannabis industry that's got $400 million invested in my own business. Okay, right. I didn't get my stock for free. I didn't get options that were given to me, and I got I bought my stock. Yeah. So I am more invested in making sure this is a success than I think anyone else. I've got a huge risk to make sure this works. So I'm not being stupid. I know what I'm doing. And listen, did I make mistakes along the way? Absolutely. But it's about hiring the right people, get a right culture. People make businesses work. I'm super happy with my decision with Matt. He has brought a great culture to Curaleaf just in the 3 months that he's been there. Streamlined the organization, got involved in Europe. I mean, just a real doer. So, and the new people we brought on yesterday, right? We got a great new CFO. We hired Camille Lyon, I think one of the most knowledgeable CPG analysts in the industry to run our IR and investment side. And we brought on strong individual for our business development. So Matt's building a great team. I'm hoping with time that all I'm going to be doing is mentoring him because I think he's going to be a long-term CEO for the company.
Nice to see Europe opening up again since COVID. I don't know about you, but I've never seen so many friends of mine travel over there this summer, and it looks like a great place to be. But
everybody wants to get out and travel around. It's been actually really, really good. Surprising with a war going on in Ukraine and stuff like that so many people are still traveling around. But I think it's a testament to to, you know, the fact that it's hard to keep people down, right? We all want to get out there and do stuff and see the world, and that's a really good thing. And that's why I'm hopeful with even all the things we talked about before we did this, before we went live. You know, I'm very hopeful because people in the end of the day I inherently think are good. And I'm really hoping that we can overcome some of these difficult times that we're going through, come out better than where we were.
Speaking of hopeful, but for the next time we see you, it won't be till midway through the NFL season. Are you a football fan?
I am, but unfortunately, my teams are not performing. They're performing worse than Curaleaf.
Who's the team?
Well, I'm a New Yorker.
Your Jets did a good off season. Your Jets did a good off season. I'll say that.
Well, let's hope that they could. You know, I always tell my kids I've got a son who's a D1 basketball player, and when he was growing up, I always said to him, I said, trying doesn't work, buddy. You got to win. Nobody remembers the guy that tried. Everybody remembers the guy that wins.
Like Ricky Bobby says, if you're not first, you're last, right? Is that what he said? Anyways, listen, appreciate the time. Ben and I appreciate it. Let's keep in touch, all right?
Been fun. Thank you.
All right, thanks Gordon. Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching. And if you like this video, wait until you see what we have next. Some of the best thought leaders in the verticals that we cover, from cannabis and psychedelics to cryptos and NFTs and sports wagering. So if you want to learn more, make sure to click on that bell for all notifications. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.